My name is Holly, 36 years old, and last month I buried my 10-year-old son Jake alone. While I watched his small casket lower into the ground, my parents and sister were across town, sipping champagne, sampling wedding cakes. 3 hours after I threw the first handful of dirt onto my child, my phone lit up with a message from Mom. "Stop being dramatic. We need to discuss something urgent." That urgent matter. The $500,000 trust fund my grandfather left for the grandson they never bothered to know. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from. Give this video a like if you've ever felt abandoned by those who should have been there for you. Let me share what true betrayal feels like. My relationship with my family has always been complicated. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the achiever, the one who never needed attention because I seemed to have everything under control. My sister Amanda, now 28, was the opposite. She was the fragile one, the one who needed constant support and validation. Our parents established this dynamic early on, and it only solidified as we grew older. When I brought home straight, as my father would glance at my report card, nod, and go back to helping Amanda with her C-average homework. "Your sister needs more help," he would say. "You're doing fine on your own." When I won first place in the state science competition, my mother attended Amanda's dance recital instead. There were always excuses. Amanda would be devastated if no one showed up, or, "You understand how important this is to your sister." I remember my high school graduation. I was valedictorian, set to give a speech I had worked on for weeks. I scanned the audience repeatedly, hoping to see my parents' faces. They arrived just as I was walking off stage, apologizing profusely because Amanda had a minor anxiety attack about her upcoming dance performance. The pattern continued through college. They missed my university graduation entirely because Amanda had a small part in a local theater production the same weekend. When I met David at 22, I thought I had finally found someone who saw me, who valued me for who I was. He was kind, attentive, and ambitious in a quiet way. We married when I was 24, and I had Jake when I was 26. My parents attended our wedding, but I overheard my mother telling a relative that she wished I had waited for someone better. David didn't come from money. He worked as an engineer at a local firm, and in my parents' eyes, that made him inferior. "You could have married someone who would take care of you properly," my mother said once, "like Amanda's boyfriend. His family owns that development company." I tried to explain that David and I were happy that we had enough, that not everything was about money or status. They never understood. My relationship with Amanda deteriorated further after Jake was born. She would visit occasionally, but always managed to make the visits about herself. If Jake was fussy, she would complain about the noise. If he was playful, she would comment on how exhausting children were. She never held him unless it was for a photo opportunity she could post on social media. My parents weren't much better as grandparents. They sent expensive gifts on Jake's birthday and Christmas, but rarely visited. When they did, they would spend most of the time talking about Amanda's latest achievements or struggles. Jake quickly learned not to expect much from them, which broke my heart. When Jake was 6, my marriage to David fell apart. I discovered he had been having an affair with a coworker for over a year. The divorce was painful, but relatively quick. David moved to another state for a new job shortly after, and his visits with Jake became increasingly rare. Phone calls every few weeks eventually dwindled to birthday and Christmas cards with impersonal notes. Jake was hurt initially, but children are resilient. We established a new normal, just the two of us against the world. Through all of this, Amanda remained the center of my parents' universe. Every family conversation revolved around her needs, her dreams, her problems. When she lost a job, my parents paid her rent for 6 months. When she wanted to find herself through an expensive yoga retreat in Bali, They covered the entire cost. Meanwhile, when I struggled to pay Jake's medical bills after an asthma attack, my mother suggested I learn to budget better. The inequality was glaring, but I had grown accustomed to it. I stopped expecting support or understanding from them years ago. I focused instead on building a life for Jake and me, creating the warm, loving home environment I had always craved as a child. I thought I had made peace with my family situation. I was wrong. After the divorce, Jake and I settled into a comfortable routine. I worked full-time as a graphic designer for a marketing agency, which allowed me to support us while still maintaining flexible hours for school pickups and doctor appointments. We lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment on the east side of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. Jake was the light of my life. He had David's curly hair and my green eyes, a combination that made strangers stop us on the street to comment on his beautiful features. But it was his personality that truly shined. He was curious about everything, constantly asking questions about how things worked. But why mom was his favorite phrase, and I never tired of hearing it. My grandfather, my mother's father, was the only family member who truly adored Jake. Grandpa Thomas was different from his daughter. Where my mother was status-conscious and cold, he was down-to-earth and warm-hearted. He had built a successful construction business from nothing and never forgot his humble beginnings. Every Sunday, we would visit him at his house by the lake, and Jake would sit at his feet, listening to stories about building houses or fishing trips from decades ago. "That boy has old eyes," Grandpa would say to me. "He's going to do important things someday." When Jake was 7, Grandpa was diagnosed with late-stage pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was poor from the beginning, and he knew he didn't have much time left. One afternoon, while Jake was playing by the lake, Grandpa called me into his study. "Holly, I need to tell you something important," he said, his voice weaker than it had been just a week before. "I've set up a trust fund for Jake." I was surprised. Grandpa had always been generous with birthday and Christmas gifts, but this was unexpected. "It's $500,000, he continued. "I've been saving for years, and with some smart investments it grew nicely. I want Jake to have options in life. College, starting a business, whatever makes him happy." "Grandpa, that's too much," I protested. "Mom and Amanda will be upset if they find out." He waved his hand dismissively. "It's my money, and I can do what I want with it. Besides, they're both well taken care of in my will. This is separate. This is for Jake because that boy is special." The trust was set up with clear terms. I would be the trustee until Jake turned 21, at which point he would gain full control. The money could only be used for his education, medical needs, or in case of true financial emergency before then. Grandpa was very specific about this. "I know you'll do right by him," he said. "You're the only one I trust with this." Grandpa passed away 2 months later. As expected, my mother and Amanda were upset when they learned about Jake's trust during the reading of the will. They both received substantial inheritances, but somehow it wasn't enough. "Why would Dad do this?" my mother complained afterward. "Jake is just a child. He doesn't need that kind of money. We could have used it for the family." I didn't engage with her complaints. I knew that in her mind, family meant her and Amanda, not Jake and me. Despite the trust fund, our daily life remained simple. I never touched the money, viewing it as Jake's future, not our present. We continued living in our apartment, shopping sales, and finding joy in free activities like hiking trails, visiting libraries, and exploring local parks. Jake never seemed to mind that we didn't have the newest gadgets or designer clothes. He was content with our camping trips to national parks, our science experiments in the kitchen, and our movie nights with homemade popcorn. Jake's interests evolved as he grew older. By age 9, he was fascinated with astronomy. We saved up for 3 months to buy him a decent telescope, and he would spend hours on our small balcony charting stars and planets. By 10, he had moved on to ecology, collecting bugs and leaves, cataloging them meticulously in notebooks with careful drawings and observations. "I want to save the rainforests when I grow up, Mom," he told me one night as I tucked him into bed. "Grandpa said I'm going to do important things, and saving trees is important, right?" "It's incredibly important," I agreed, kissing his forehead. "And you're going to be amazing at it." Throughout these years, my family remained distant. My parents would invite us to major holidays, but the gatherings were always tense. Jake would be relegated to a corner with his tablet, while the adults discussed Amanda's latest venture or crisis. No one ever asked about his interests or achievements. No one seemed to notice how incredibly special he was. The trust fund was never mentioned directly, but occasionally my mother would make pointed comments about money being wasted or sitting unused when it could benefit the whole family. I ignored these hints. The money was Jake's future, not a family piggy bank. Little did I know that this trust meant to secure my son's future would soon become the center of the most painful betrayal of my life. It was a Tuesday afternoon in April. Spring had finally arrived after a long, harsh winter, and the trees were just starting to bloom. Jake had begged to ride his bike to his friend Mason's house after school. It was only 5 blocks away, and at 10 years old, he had proven himself responsible enough for the short journey. "Text me when you get there," I reminded him as he strapped on his helmet. "And be home by 5:30 for dinner." "I know, Mom," he said with a slight eye roll that had recently become part of his preteen repertoire. "You tell me every time." "That's because I love you," every time I replied our standard exchange. He grinned and pedaled away, turning once to wave before rounding the corner. That wave, that final glimpse of his smile, would replay in my mind endlessly in the weeks to come. I was in the middle of a work call when my phone lit up with an unknown number. I normally would have let it go to voicemail, but something made me excuse myself from the meeting to answer. "Is this Holly Patterson?" a formal voice asked. "Mother of Jake Patterson?" The world slowed down as the hospital representative explained that Jake had been hit by a car. I don't remember ending the call or grabbing my keys. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. I only remember the desperate prayer, repeating in my head, "Please let him be okay. Please let him be okay." The emergency room was chaotic, but somehow I found my way to the desk. "My son," I gasped. "Jake Patterson. He was brought in after a bike accident." The nurse's face changed subtly, and my heart stopped. She called for a doctor, and I was led to a small private waiting room. That's when I knew it was bad. Very bad. The doctor who entered was young, with kind eyes that already held too much sorrow. "Miss Patterson," he began, "we did everything we could." The words washed over me like ice water. Everything they could, past tense. I started shaking my head before he even finished his sentence. "Jake sustained severe head trauma when he was struck by the vehicle," he continued gently. "Despite our best efforts, we couldn't save him. I'm so very sorry for your loss." Loss. Such a simple word for the complete devastation of my world. "No," I whispered. "There must be some mistake. He was just riding his bike. He was wearing his helmet. I made sure of it." "The helmet likely prevented immediate death at the scene," the doctor explained, "but the impact was too severe. The internal injuries were catastrophic." I don't know how long I sat there rocking back and forth, alternating between stunned silence and gut-wrenching sobs. A social worker appeared at some point, offering water tissues resources for grief counseling. "Is there someone we can call for you?" she asked gently. In my shock, I gave them my mother's number. Some childlike part of me still believed that in the worst moment of my life, my mother would be there for me, would hold me up when I couldn't stand on my own. I was in the hospital chapel when my phone rang. My mother's ringtone. I answered immediately. "Mom," I choked out. "Jake is gone. He's gone." There was a pause before she responded. "Oh, Holly, that's terrible news." Her voice was somber but controlled. Too controlled. "Are you at the hospital now? What happened?" I explained about the accident in broken sentences, barely able to form coherent thoughts. "Can you come?" I finally asked. "I can't do this alone. I can't." Another pause. "Oh, sweetie, we're actually out with Amanda right now. She's looking at wedding venues. You know how hard it is to get appointments at these places." I couldn't process what I was hearing. "Mom, Jake is dead. Your grandson is dead." "I understand that, Holly, and we're very upset. But there's nothing we can do for him now, is there? Amanda has been planning this wedding for months. She's already upset enough about having to downsize some of her plans due to budget constraints." I hung up without responding. In that moment, something inside me hardened. I called my friend Sarah instead, who dropped everything and came immediately. She stayed with me through the unbearable process of signing forms, making preliminary funeral arrangements, and eventually seeing Jake's body one last time. He looked peaceful, almost as if he were sleeping, but the absence of his energy, his constant motion and curiosity, made the stillness unbearable. This wasn't my Jake. My Jake was laughter and questions and dirt-smudged cheeks. This was just the shell he'd left behind. Over the next 2 days, I moved through preparations in a fog. Sarah and a few other friends rallied around me, helping with the impossible tasks of choosing a casket, selecting readings, finding a suit to bury my child in. My phone remained silent, except for messages from friends and Jake's teachers. Nothing from my family except a brief text from Amanda. "So, sorry about Jake. Really bad timing with all the wedding stuff. Hope you're okay." I kept expecting my parents to call to say they had reconsidered, that they would be there for the funeral, that their grandson's death took precedence over wedding venue tours. The call never came. The accident made the local news. The driver who hit Jake was an elderly man who had suffered a minor stroke behind the wheel. I couldn't bring myself to hate him. He was destroyed by what had happened, his wife told me when she called to express their devastation. They would live with this forever, too. The night before the funeral, I sat alone in Jake's room, surrounded by his things. His telescope pointed out the window, his collection of rocks and feathers arranged carefully on shelves. His favorite stuffed tiger, worn from years of love, sitting on his pillow. I pulled it to my chest and breathed in his scent, still lingering on the fabric. How was I supposed to live in a world without him in it? The day of Jake's funeral dawned bright and clear, a beautiful spring morning that felt like a mockery of my grief. Sarah arrived early to help me dress, bringing coffee and bagels I couldn't eat. My black dress felt too tight, too formal, too final. Nothing prepares you for selecting an outfit to bury your child in. The service was scheduled for 11 in the morning at a small chapel near our apartment. Jake's teachers had helped coordinate with his classmates' parents, and several of his friends would be attending with their families. My colleagues from work had sent a beautiful arrangement of sunflowers, Jake's favorite. His soccer coach had organized a special tribute from the team. I arrived early to have a few moments alone with the closed casket. They had suggested I might want to see him one last time before the service, but I couldn't bear it. I wanted to remember him laughing alive, not the still form I had seen in the hospital. Gradually, people began to arrive. Sarah stayed by my side, squeezing my hand when words failed. Jake's best friend Mason came with his parents, the little boy's face streaked with tears. He was going to sleep over this weekend, he whispered as he hugged me. We were going to build a fort. These simple, mundane plans, now rendered impossible, broke my heart all over again. I kept glancing at the door, some irrational part of me still expecting my parents and Amanda to walk through it. Even now, even after everything, I couldn't quite believe they would miss their only grandson's funeral entirely. The service was brief, but beautiful. Jake's third-grade teacher spoke about his curiosity and kindness. His soccer coach talked about his determination and team spirit. Mason's father read a children's book about stars that Jake had loved. Throughout it, all the empty spaces in the front row, where family should have been screamed louder than any of the kind words being spoken. As the service concluded, we moved to the cemetery for the burial. The spring air was cool, but not cold, with birds singing obliviously in nearby trees. The small casket seemed impossibly heavy for the pallbearers, as if the weight of lost potential made it denser than physics should allow. I stood alone at the graveside as they lowered Jake into the ground. Sarah had offered to stand with me, but I needed these final moments to be just between Jake and me. I whispered my private goodbyes as the casket descended, promising him I would find a way to keep going, to live in a way that would make him proud. The cemetery workers stood at a respectful distance, waiting to complete their grim task after I left. I knew I needed to walk away to let them finish, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. Walking away meant it was really over. That Jake was really gone. Eventually, Sarah gently touched my elbow. "Come on," she whispered. "Let's get you home." I nodded numbly and turned to leave, casting one final glance at the hole in the earth that now held my heart. Back at my apartment, a few close friends had organized a small gathering with sandwiches and coffee. I moved through it like a ghost, accepting condolences, nodding at memories shared. My phone had been silent all day, not even a text, asking how the funeral had gone. Then, as people were starting to leave, my phone pinged with a notification. Instinctively, I checked it, some part of me hoping it might finally be my mother. Instead, it was a social media alert. Amanda had tagged our mother in a post. With trembling fingers, I opened the app. There they were, my mother, my father, and Amanda, glasses raised in a champagne toast, smiling broadly at an elegant restaurant. The caption read, "Finalizing the wedding wine selection with Mom and Dad, only 6 months until I'm Mrs. William Henderson, number wedding planning, number champagne tasting." The timestamp showed it had been posted just as Jake's casket was being lowered into the ground. I must have made some sound because Sarah was suddenly beside me looking at my phone. She gasped, then quickly tried to take the device from my hands. "Holly, don't look at that right now, please." But I couldn't stop staring. They were smiling, celebrating. While I buried my son, my family was drinking champagne and planning a wedding as if nothing had happened, as if Jake had never existed at all. Without thinking, I texted my mother. "How could you be wine tasting during Jake's funeral? How could you do this to me? To him?" Her response came almost immediately. "Stop being so dramatic, Holly. Life goes on. We need to discuss something urgent with you anyway. Come by the house tomorrow at 2. I threw my phone across the room where it hit the wall and clattered to the floor. Sarah and my remaining friends exchanged worried glances. They were at a wine tasting, I said, my voice hollow. During the funeral. They were sampling champagne while I was putting Jake in the ground. Sarah wrapped her arms around me as I collapsed, the final betrayal breaking through whatever composure I had maintained during the day. I cried until there was nothing left, until my throat was raw and my eyes swollen shut. Later that night, after everyone had gone, and the apartment was silent, in a way it never had been when Jake was alive, I picked up my phone from where it had fallen. The screen was cracked, a spiderweb of lines distorting the display. There was another text from my mother. We need to discuss Jake's trust fund. It's important. Don't make this difficult. And suddenly, with crystal clarity, I understood. This wasn't about grief or family or even Jake. This was about money. The $500,000 my grandfather had left for his great-grandson. The money that was never supposed to be touched until Jake turned 21. The money that with Jake gone, they now wanted for themselves. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The realization that my family's interest in connecting after Jake's death was solely about his trust fund kept me awake, alternating between tears and white-hot anger. By morning I was exhausted but resolved. I would meet with them, hear what they had to say, and then decide how to proceed. I spent the morning researching the terms of the trust. Grandpa Thomas had been careful and specific in his instructions. As trustee, I now had certain responsibilities and obligations. I called the bank that managed the trust and spoke with a financial advisor who expressed condolences and explained that as Jake's sole legal guardian, I would need to meet with them to discuss the disposition of the funds. There should be clear instructions in the trust documents regarding contingencies in case of the beneficiary's death, she explained gently. Would you like to schedule an appointment to review these? I made an appointment for later in the week, then tried to prepare myself mentally for the meeting with my family. What exactly were they expecting? That I would simply hand over $500,000 for Amanda's wedding? The very thought was so absurd it would have been funny if it weren't so painfully indicative of their true characters. At precisely 2 o'clock, I pulled into my parents' driveway. Their house was the same upper-middle-class suburban home I'd grown up in, meticulously maintained to project success and stability. The rose bushes my mother prized were beginning to bloom, carefully pruned and fertilized, as she always insisted they must be. I rang the doorbell rather than using my old key. I was no longer the daughter who lived here. I was no longer sure I was their daughter at all. My father opened the door, his face set in the stern expression he used when conducting business. Holly, you're on time. Good. No hug, no condolences. Just a businesslike acknowledgement of my punctuality. He led me to the dining room where my mother and Amanda were already seated at the table. Amanda was dressed impeccably, as always, her engagement ring catching the light, as she fidgeted with a folder in front of her. My mother looked up briefly, then back down at some papers. Sit down, Holly, she said, gesturing to the empty chair across from them. We have important matters to discuss. I remained standing. Before we begin, I'd like to know why none of you came to Jake's funeral. My mother sighed dramatically. We've been through this. It was simply too painful for us. And Amanda had that appointment scheduled for months. Too painful for you, I repeated incredulously. He was my son, my child, and you couldn't cancel a wine tasting? It wasn't just wine tasting, Amanda interjected. It was a complete venue walkthrough with the wedding coordinator. Do you know how hard it is to reschedule those? I stared at her, unable to comprehend how she could possibly believe her wedding preparations superseded her nephew's funeral. Can we please focus on the matter at hand? My father said, tapping the table impatiently. We're here to discuss the trust fund. Finally, I sat down. What about it? My mother slid a document across the table. We've had our attorney draft this. It's a simple transfer of assets from Jake's trust to a joint family account. I glanced at the paper but didn't touch it. And why would I sign this? Because it's the right thing to do, my mother said firmly. That money was meant for family, and now that Jake is gone, it should go to support the family's needs. Such as I asked, though, I already knew the answer. Amanda straightened in her seat. Well, my wedding, for starters. William and I want the perfect day, but his parents can only contribute so much. We've had to cut back on so many things already." The casual way she referenced Jake's death as an opportunity to fund her wedding made my stomach turn. "We had to downgrade from the Ritz to the Grand Hotel," she continued, oblivious to my expression. "And the flowers I wanted are apparently out of season and would cost a fortune to import. Plus, I really had my heart set on a designer gown." "So, you want to use my dead son's money to pay for out-of-season flowers?" I asked quietly. "Don't be crass, Holly," my mother snapped. "This isn't just about the wedding. It's about what's fair. That money should benefit the whole family, not just sit in some account doing nothing." "It wasn't doing nothing," I countered. "It was securing Jake's future. His college education, his dreams." "But he doesn't have a future anymore," Amanda said bluntly, then had the grace to look slightly abashed when both our parents shot her warning looks. "What your sister means," my father interjected quickly, "is that circumstances have changed. The money's purpose can no longer be fulfilled as originally intended." "And you think Grandpa Thomas would want it spent on Amanda's wedding?" "He would want it to benefit the family," my mother insisted. "Amanda is family. Her wedding is an important family milestone." I looked at each of their faces, searching for any sign of grief, any indication that they understood the magnitude of what had happened. Jake was dead. My son, their grandson and nephew, was gone forever. And all they cared about was how his money could now benefit them. "Did any of you even cry when you heard he died?" I asked suddenly. "Did you feel anything at all?" "Of course we did," my mother said, looking offended. "We're not monsters, Holly." "But not enough to attend his funeral, not enough to call me afterward, to see how I was coping with burying my only child." "We're calling you now," Amanda pointed out. "We're trying to move forward as a family." "No," I said, standing up. "You're trying to get your hands on Jake's money. That's all this island." "You're being selfish," my mother said sharply. "That money could help multiple family members, not just sit in an account for one person who no longer needs it." "Selfish," I repeated, my voice rising. "My son is dead. Dead. And you're calling me selfish for not immediately thinking about how his death could financially benefit you." "Lower your voice," my father warned. "There's no need for hysterics." "No need," I was nearly shouting now. "You skipped Jake's funeral for a wine tasting, and now you want his money for wedding flowers, and I'm not supposed to be upset about that." "If you won't be reasonable," my father said, "we'll have no choice but to pursue legal options. Our attorney believes we have a strong case, as next of kin, to petition for redistribution of the trust assets." "Next of kin," I laughed bitterly. "I'm his mother. I'm the trustee. You have no legal standing whatsoever." "We'll see about that," my mother said coldly. "Family money should stay in the family, and since Jake is no longer with us, that money should revert to the family pool." I picked up my purse and moved toward the door. "We're done here. Don't contact me again unless it's to apologize for missing your grandson's funeral." "You'll regret this, Holly," my father called after me. "We're prepared to take this all the way to court if necessary." I turned back one last time. "Go ahead. Explain to a judge how you were too busy wine tasting to attend your grandson's funeral, but not too busy to try to get your hands on his money the very next day. See how well that goes for you." I walked out, slamming the door behind me. In my car, I finally broke down, sobbing over the steering wheel. I had lost not only my son, but my entire family of origin in the space of a week. The depth of their betrayal was almost as painful as my grief. Almost, but not quite. Nothing could compare to the void Jake's absence had created. And I was determined that his memory and the gift his great-grandfather had left him would be honored properly, no matter what my family tried to do. 3 days after the disastrous meeting with my family, I received a formal letter from their attorney. The language was cold and technical, demanding that I release the assets from the Patterson Minor Trust into the Family General Fund within 30 days or face legal action. It included vague references to mental and emotional distress, preventing me from making sound financial decisions following Jake's death. They were suggesting I was too distraught to manage the trust properly, that my grief was clouding my judgment. It was manipulative and cruel, using my pain as a weapon against me. I took the letter to my appointment with the bank's trust department. The financial advisor, a kind woman named Marjorie, who had known my grandfather, was visibly disturbed by its contents. "This has no legal merit whatsoever," she assured me after reading it. "The trust document is crystal clear. In the event of Jake's death before reaching age 21, you, as his mother and trustee, become the sole beneficiary. Your grandfather was very specific about this." "Why would he do that?" I asked, surprised. I hadn't known this detail. "He told me he trusted your judgment," Marjorie explained. "He said if the unthinkable happened and Jake passed away young, you would know best how to honor his memory with the funds." This knowledge was both comforting and overwhelming. Grandpa Thomas had trusted me completely, even planning for scenarios too painful to contemplate. "What should I do about this?" I asked, indicating the letter. "I suggest you consult with a trust attorney. I can recommend someone excellent who specializes in these matters, but please know that legally your position is very strong. They have no claim to these funds." I followed her advice and met with attorney Daniel Weber the following day. He reviewed the trust documents, the letter from my parents' lawyer, and listened carefully to my explanation of the family dynamics. "Unfortunately, I see cases like this more often than you might think," he said when I had finished. "Money has a way of bringing out the worst in people, especially when grief is involved." "Can they really take me to court over this?" I asked. "They can try," he acknowledged. "Anyone can file a lawsuit for almost anything. But would they win? Absolutely not. The trust document is ironclad, and your grandfather clearly knew what he was doing when he established it. Additionally, no judge would look kindly on their behavior surrounding Jake's funeral." He drafted a formal response to their attorney, asserting my rights as trustee and beneficiary and warning against any further harassment or legal threats. I left his office feeling slightly more in control, but the emotional toll was mounting. That evening, my phone began lighting up with messages from extended family members. Apparently, my parents had begun spreading their version of events, that I was emotionally unstable following Jake's death, that I was hoarding family money that could benefit everyone, that I was being selfish and unreasonable. An aunt I hadn't spoken to in years messaged, "Your mother is so worried about you, sweetie. Why not let them help you make decisions until you're thinking clearly again?" A cousin wrote, "Families should support each other. Amanda's wedding would bring joy to everyone during this difficult time." Even my father's brother, Uncle Pete, who had always been kind to me, called to suggest I consider the bigger picture and do what's best for family harmony. None of them mentioned Jake. None of them asked how I was coping with the loss of my child. It was all about the money, thinly veiled with fake concern for my mental state. I stopped responding to messages. I changed my social media settings to private. I forwarded all calls from family members to voicemail. I needed space to grieve my son without the constant pressure and manipulation. Sleep became elusive. I would lie awake replaying memories of Jake, then shift to anxiety about the legal threats, then back to grief. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Lynette, who specialized in parental bereavement. Our first session, I could barely speak through my tears. By our third, I was able to articulate the dual traumas I was experiencing, the loss of Jake and the betrayal by my family. "What you're going through is unimaginably difficult," she told me. Grief alone is overwhelming. Adding family conflict to it creates a compound trauma. Be gentle with yourself during this process. I feel like I'm drowning, I admitted. Some days I can barely get out of bed. That's normal, she assured me. But I'm concerned about the additional stress your family is putting on you. Have you considered what you want to do with the trust? I hadn't allowed myself to think about it yet. The money represented Jake's future, a future that no longer existed. Making plans for it felt like another form of goodbye. Meanwhile, the pressure from my family intensified. Amanda began posting veiled comments on social media about toxic family members and selfish behavior during her special time. My mother left daily voicemails, alternating between guilt trips and thinly veiled threats. "You're breaking your father's heart," one message said. "After everything we've done for you." Another was more direct. "Our lawyer says we have several options to pursue. This could get very unpleasant, Holly. Is that really what you want?" A particularly painful message came from Amanda. "I had to cancel the deposit on my dream venue because of you. I hope you're happy. This was supposed to be the most important day of my life, and you're ruining it because you can't think of anyone but yourself." The irony of her accusing me of selfishness while complaining about wedding venues 3 weeks after my son's death was breathtaking. Attorney Weber advised me to document everything, save all messages, record dates, and times of calls, keep copies of all written correspondence. If they do try to take this to court, their own behavior will work against them, he assured me. But I didn't want a legal battle. I didn't want more conflict. I wanted to be left alone, to mourn my son, to figure out how to live in a world without him. Every ounce of energy I spent defending myself against my family's attacks was energy taken away from processing my grief. After a particularly difficult day, when my father had called my workplace trying to speak to my boss about my concerning behavior, thankfully, my boss was supportive and protective of my privacy. I broke down during my therapy session with Dr. Linnett. "I can't keep doing this," I sobbed. "I can't fight them and grieve Jake at the same time. It's too much." "You don't have to decide everything right now," she reminded me, "but perhaps making a decision about the trust would give you some peace. Remove it as a point of conflict." "What would you do?" I asked her. "I can't tell you that," she said gently. "But I can ask you, what would honor Jake's memory? What would your grandfather want? And most importantly, what would give you some measure of healing in this impossible situation?" Those questions stayed with me for days as I tried to imagine a path forward. What would honor Jake? Certainly not funding Amanda's extravagant wedding. What would Grandpa Thomas want? For the money to make a positive difference. I was sure of that. What would help me heal? Finding meaning in Jake's too short life and tragic death. Slowly, an idea began to form. A way to honor both Jake and my grandfather. A way to transform this painful conflict into something meaningful. A way to take back control and set boundaries with my toxic family once and for all. I scheduled a meeting with Attorney Weber to discuss my plan, then sent a message to my parents. "I've made a decision about the trust. Meet me at Giovanni's restaurant on Thursday at noon. This will be our final discussion on the matter." Giovanni's was a public place where they wouldn't be able to make a scene, and I would finally have my say. Thursday arrived, and with it, a strange sense of calm. I had spent the previous evening looking through photos of Jake, telling him about my plan, seeking some sign of approval from the universe. A shooting star had blazed across the sky as I stood on my balcony, and I chose to take it as a positive omen. I arrived at Giovanni's 15 minutes early, accompanied by Attorney Weber. We selected a table in the corner with good visibility of the entrance, but enough privacy for our conversation. He had brought the necessary paperwork based on our previous discussion. "Are you sure about this?" he asked me one last time. I nodded. "Completely sure. It feels right." My parents arrived exactly at noon, punctual as always. Amanda was with them, wearing an expression that wavered between smugness and feigned sorrow. They spotted me and made their way over, faltering slightly, when they noticed Attorney Weber. "What is this?" my father demanded as they reached the table. "We agreed to a family discussion, not a legal ambush." "Please sit down," I said calmly. "This won't take long." They exchanged glances but took their seats. A waiter approached to take drink orders, but my father waved him away impatiently. "We're not here to socialize," he said. "We're here to resolve the trust fund situation." "Yes, we are," I agreed. "And I've made my decision." "Finally seeing reason, are you?" my mother asked, a note of triumph in her voice. "In a manner of speaking," I replied. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about what Jake would want, what Grandpa Thomas intended, and what will allow me to move forward with my life." Amanda leaned forward eagerly. "So you'll transfer the funds?" "No," I said simply. "I will not be transferring any money to you for your wedding or for any other purpose." My father's face darkened. "Then why are we here, if you're just going to be obstinate?" "Let me finish," I interrupted, surprising myself with my steadiness. "I've decided to establish the Jake Patterson Memorial Scholarship Fund for children who have lost parents or siblings to unexpected tragedies." Silence fell over the table. This clearly wasn't what they had been expecting. "The $500,000 will form the foundation of an endowment," I continued. "The interest will fund annual scholarships to help children like Jake pursue education in environmental science, astronomy, or ecological conservation, all fields he was passionate about." "You can't do that," my mother sputtered. "That money belongs in the family." "Actually, she can," Attorney Weber interjected. "As the sole beneficiary following Jake's passing, Miss Patterson has complete legal authority to determine how the funds are used." "We'll fight this in court," my father threatened. "You're welcome to try," Attorney Weber replied. "But I should inform you that we have documented all your communications since Jake's death, including your absence from his funeral, your celebration activities during the service, and your subsequent demands for the money. No judge will look favorably on your case." Amanda's face had turned red with anger. "So, you're just going to give away $500,000 to strangers? What about family? What about my wedding?" I looked at her with genuine pity. "Jake was family, my son, your nephew. He died, and none of you could be bothered to attend his funeral because you were too busy planning your wedding. And the very next day you started plotting to get his money. That's not family, Amanda. That's opportunism." "How dare you?" my mother began, but I cut her off. "I'm not finished. The scholarship fund will be announced next week with a formal ceremony on what would have been Jake's 11th birthday. You're welcome to attend, but I don't expect you will." I slid a folder across the table. "These are copies of the trust documents, Attorney Weber's legal opinion, and the paperwork establishing the scholarship fund. It's already done. The transfer of assets is being processed as we speak." My father didn't touch the folder. "If you do this, Holly, you're no longer part of this family." I met his gaze steadily. "I stopped being part of this family the moment you chose a wine tasting over your grandson's funeral." "You've always been difficult," my mother said coldly. "Always thinking you're better than everyone else." "No, Mom. I just expected basic human decency from the people who were supposed to love me. That was clearly too much to ask." I stood up, signaling the end of our meeting. "I won't be contacting you again. Please don't try to contact me. Any further communication should go through Attorney Weber." "You'll regret this," Amanda hissed. When you're all alone with no family to support you, you'll wish you'd made a different choice. I looked at her sad, angry face and felt a wave of unexpected compassion. I'm already alone, Amanda. You all made sure of that when you abandoned me at the worst moment of my life. The difference is, now I'm choosing to be alone rather than having it forced upon me. We left the restaurant, Attorney Weber and I, walking out into the bright afternoon sunshine. For the first time since Jake's death, I felt a tiny flicker of peace. Not happiness, not even close, but a small sense that I was moving in the right direction. The next year was the hardest of my life. Grief doesn't follow a tidy timeline or a predictable pattern. Some days were almost bearable. Others brought me back to that first raw agony. I kept Jake's room intact for 6 months, before finally finding the strength to sort through his belongings, keeping the most precious items, and donating the rest to children in need. The Jake Patterson Memorial Scholarship Fund became my purpose. Working with educational consultants and financial advisors, I established a selection committee and criteria for recipients. The first scholarships would be awarded on the 1-year anniversary of Jake's death, a way of creating something meaningful from the darkest day of my life. I continued therapy with Dr. Lynette, joined a support group for parents who had lost children, and slowly began rebuilding a life around the Jake-shaped hole in my heart. Sarah remained a steadfast friend, and other friendships deepened as people showed up for me in ways my family never had. True to their word, my parents and Amanda cut off all contact. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Amanda had indeed gotten married in a ceremony much more modest than her original plans. I felt no satisfaction in this news, only a dull sadness at how thoroughly money had poisoned what should have been loving relationships. On the first anniversary of Jake's death, I visited his grave early in the morning before the scholarship ceremony scheduled for that afternoon. I brought his favorite sunflowers and sat beside the small headstone, tracing his name with my finger. "We're giving out the first scholarships today, buddy." I told him, the one-sided conversations having become a comfort over the months. 5 kids who've been through hard things just like you. They all want to make the world better just like you did. A gentle breeze rustled the trees overhead, and I chose to interpret it as Jake's approval. "I miss you every single day," I continued. "But I'm trying to live in a way that would make you proud. I'm trying to make sure some good comes from all of this." Later that day, as I presented certificates to the first 5 scholarship recipients, I felt Jake's presence so strongly it nearly took my breath away. These bright, determined young people, each of whom had faced tragic loss, were finding ways to move forward without forgetting those they had lost. They were the living embodiment of the resilience I was still struggling to build. One of them, a 12-year-old girl who had lost both parents in a house fire, hugged me tightly after receiving her certificate. "Thank you," she whispered. "I promise I'll make Jake proud." And in that moment, I understood the truth that would guide the rest of my life. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up when you're broken. Sometimes it's about who helps you honor the memories of those you've lost. Sometimes it's about creating connection from shared pain. Each time I award a new scholarship in Jake's name, I see his smile reflected in the recipients' hopeful faces. Each time a former recipient sends an update about their studies or achievements, I feel Jake's curiosity and enthusiasm living on through their work. My son lived for only 10 years, but through this fund, his legacy will continue for generations. The $500,000 my grandfather left him will help hundreds of children over time, creating a ripple effect of opportunity and healing that stretches far beyond what any wedding or family vacation could have. Accomplished. Sometimes the deepest wounds can become doorways to our greatest purpose. Sometimes the cruelest betrayals can lead us to our truest connections. And sometimes, when we lose everything we thought mattered, we discover what truly matters was something else entirely. If you've ever faced betrayal from those who should have loved you most, know that you're not alone. If you're struggling to find meaning after loss, know that it's possible even when it seems impossible. Drop a comment below sharing how you've navigated family conflict or honored someone you've lost. Like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that even in our darkest moments, a way forward is possible. Thank you for bearing witness to my journey, and may you find strength for your own.